Welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, and today I'm opening the Cotton Cuts Gnome of the Month for May? April. It might be April. I'm a little behind on my stuff. I went out of town. I had family visiting, so you know, schedules get off. So I'm a little behind on my Gnome of the Month. But I believe this is April. This is the one with, and you can see them ahead of time on their website. It's not a mystery because they show what it is before you even get it. Yeah, this is April, and this was packed by Dawn. This is what they look like. Put it there, okay? So for April, you know, the kind of Easter themed, I guess, bunny rabbits and whatnot. I love the colors. Not a huge fan of the bunny ears. I may change that and make it just a kind of a hat or something. We'll see. I'll see what it looks like. But I got the boutique, so let's show you the colors. Here is the girl. The colors for the girl. And before we start sewing, on the back of each one, they give you a recipe for the month. So from the kitchen of Team Cotton Cuts, this month's recipe comes to us from one of our member care specialists, Jessica. This recipe is a spring staple at her house. She adds dill pickles to the yolk mixture and bacon to the top of these eggs, always a fan favorite. How do you like your eggs? And this is a recipe for classic deviled eggs. Yeah. So that's what's on here. Let's get sewing. So if you've watched any of my previous videos about the Cotton Cuts Gnome of the Month, you know that I like to use the quilter's grid to put it all together, which is just basically like a fusible interfacing type thing that helps you to put all the squares together neatly, evenly, all that good stuff. What I also like to do though is, I guess it's kind of a hack because I've not seen anybody else do this, but I use it to put my half square triangles together. Because, you know, half square triangles can be a challenge, right? And that's sewing it using squares. When you're sewing them together with the actual triangles, it's even more challenging because it's just easier to mess it up and stretch and distort and all that stuff. At least in my experience, what I found with, you know, when I'm working with them. So I like to use a little bit of the quilter's grid on the edges of the triangles, the part where I actually sew. And I fuse it onto those edges, and then I fold the fabric over, and then I sew it down, and I don't get those distortions that I do, or that I tend to get when I don't use it. Because I can be a little heavy-handed sometimes when I'm ironing, when I open it up to iron. And so this helps it to not have that issue when I open it up and I iron. So yeah, you know, free tip for you right there. Try a little quilter's grid on your triangles in your Cotton Cuts, on your Cotton Cuts triangles, and for your half square triangles, and you know, you might like it. So this next part is something that I do. It's a little extra. I like to iron the seams open when I use the quilter's grid because the quilter's grid is extra bulk in your seams, and it does, you know, as with anything, it makes for extra thickness in there, and it's hard for it to lie flat, right? So I cut off the if you can see, the tiniest sliver of the very edge, because I really don't want to lose my too much of my seam, but I cut it off so that I can iron my edges open, because otherwise it's it's basically fused together, and you can only iron your seams to the side, to one side or the other. And I found when I do that, it just makes for too much bulk, especially because after I do the half square triangles and I open them up and I essentially have a 2.5 inch square, I have to fuse that as a square to more quilter's grid with the rest of the squares. So this is just an extra step that I do, and that's again because I use quilter's grid to make my half square triangles. Cut the little ends off so I can iron the seams open and then add it to the rest just like a regular 2.5 inch square. So here I'm just showing you my process for ironing open the seams, and this is on the half square triangles, and I line them all up. I use a parchment paper because sometimes little spots of the fusible is showing, and I've had it stick to either my ironing board or my mat or my iron or whatever. So I usually use some parchment paper in between, and I use my no steam iron, and mainly because I don't want to have to deal with steam or stretching, but also because I can just set my iron there and leave it have it add a little extra something without me sitting there pressing it, because my other iron is an Oliso, and it has as soon as you let it go, it lifts itself up onto the, I don't know, like I think of it as like mini stilts, so that you don't accidentally burn anything. But I want my iron to stay down, so that's what I use this for, and it just adds a little extra weight without me having to sit there holding it and everything. So yeah, kind of boring, but this is what I do. I just press it down and iron them open. So after pressing my half square triangles open, now I need to trim them down, make sure they're 2.5 inch squares. So I use my little itty bitty 2.5 inch square ruler by Creative Grids, which who knew you needed a little teeny tiny 2.5 inch square ruler, but I love it. I just line it up and make sure, I line up the seam with the diagonal line in the center, and I just use it to cut. And I do that on all my little half square triangles before I combine them with the rest of the 2.5 inch squares. And now this is the part where I attach all of my squares to the quilter's grid. So that sheet right there is the quilter's grid, and you can't really see it from this angle, but there is an actual grid. There are grid lines on this sheet, and it helps you to line up your squares so that they're straight and even and all that stuff. And I just cut it to the size that I need. I don't worry about if it's slightly too small or slightly too big, but I do turn my ceiling fan off when I'm doing this, because as you can imagine, I've had them blow around. So I just line them up, and I usually get maybe like 2 rows first. Something I don't go too far, because I'm afraid that like something will blow them. I'll breathe heavy, or somebody will walk through the house and create some sort of breeze, and then my pieces will fly away after I just got carefully laying them out. So I'll do a little bit. See, there you go. I got my iron. I just kind of use it to tack them down slightly, and then I just start adding more as I go. And if you can see a little bit to the left there, I have already laid out my gnome to make sure I know which pieces go where, make sure I'm putting them in the right space. But also, because I changed this month's design, I wanted to make sure I had the right pieces, I had the right colors, I had them in the right spot. etc., etc. So yeah, so this is just, and again I use my no seam iron for this. I'm not 100% sure. They might tell you to use steam when you're doing this. I can't remember, but I just, since I'm already using my no steam iron, that's just what I'm using. And I prefer it that way because if I want to just set it down, I just set it down. So then I just keep working my way up, adding squares to the grid until I get it all completed and it's ready to sew. So for the sewing part, you just fold. I do columns first. I sew the columns first, fold it over lengthwise, and sew your 1/4 inch seam. You can see this is the back side of the quilter's grid. You can see the grid lines actually on there. The grid lines are actually on the back. You can see through to the front when you're fusing your fabric on, but the lines themselves are actually on the back, which is why you can see them here. But yeah, just sew your 1/4 inch seam, or whatever project you're doing, but this is a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And rinse and repeat all the way down each column. So here, just like any other thing, I'm setting my seams, and I go down each column and go ahead and set my seams before I start pressing things open. And actually, I don't show it, but after I set my seams, I do go and trim off the very, very, very sliver of an edge, like I did with the half square triangles, because I can't, if I don't trim those, basically cutting them open, cutting those edges open, I'm not able to press my seams open. So, and then here I'm starting to press them open, and then I'll flip them over and press the seams open on the other side before sewing them the opposite direction. Oh, and I forgot to mention, before you press them open, you do have to snip them off at the rows. So where you're gonna sew them the opposite direction, going from side to side instead of lengthwise, you have to snip it so you can actually fold over the fabric and sew across, or you won't be able to do that. So get yourself a good pair of sharp scissors that have a sharp tip, and then just go through and snip at each row. So So after snipping each of the rows and pressing the seams open for the columns, and you go back and sew the opposite direction, so down the rows. Just like you did with the columns, you fold it over and you sew down each row. And it's just rinse and repeat. After you do each one, you set your seams, go through and use a rotary cutter and snip off the very edges so that you can press the seams open, and press your seams open, and then you're done. Okay, so before I show you the finished, which you should have kind of seen a little bit, but this, I did the boy, and this is what he was supposed to look like, and this is what I ended up doing. Ta-da! So I turned the bunny ears into a hat, and I also grabbed, this is pink, really, really light pink. They give you a lot of extra fabric in each of the kits so that you can change things around how you want. And so I grabbed this from the February gnome. There was a lot of extra pink left, and so I put that in there. I made it that way. So I will do the girl the same way, and I will be changing those eggs, and I think this one too, because what I have in mind, I will need both places, and so I'll keep you guys aware of that. But anyway, so tell me what you think about my change and what you thought about, you know, this month's, or this the April gnome in general. And don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to let you know every time I post a video. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.